we get to the application review. Otherwise, let's get started. So again, good morning, everyone. My name is Rima Atung. I'm the grant coordinator for the Restorative Justice Program. Just a reminder, this is a public meeting and it is being recorded. With that in mind, if you can, please use the raise hand function on Teams and verbally give your questions or comments so we can capture it all as part of the recorded meeting and make sure that we get to everyone and every comment and question is addressed. Since it is a public meeting, there may be members of the public in attendance. However, from here on out, I'm going to be addressing the Grant Advisory Committee. We have some time set aside towards the end for public comment. So if you are a member of the public and not the Grant Advisory Committee, please hold off on making comments until that public comment section. Grant Advisory Committee members, just to keep everything consistent and on track, if you have a question about a specific application, please address your questions to the CJC and not the applicant, and we will follow up with the applicant rather than have you directly addressing them during this meeting. The purpose of this meeting is really to gather that feedback, so we just want to make sure that we deal with it all consistently. So with that in mind, here is our agenda for today. We're going to do the welcome and roll call here in a minute. Look at the GAC roles and responsibilities in the application review. Look at our preliminary applications from the 15 applicants that we did get. We'll have a brief funding discussion about the upcoming biennium funding, and then we'll do that public comment that I mentioned and go over the next steps. It looks like we got at least another person signed on, so welcome. Thank you for showing up bright and early on this Monday morning. I have my coffee right here. It's my third espresso, so please just keep that in mind. All right, so Grant Advisory Committee roles and responsibilities. I know this is going to be real familiar to folks that have been on the Grant Advisory Committee for a while now, but we do need to just go through it to make sure it's on record and also we're all on the same page. So here is a timeline of the request for grant proposals. Right now, we were at this Grant Advisory Committee meeting number 2 on 6/16. The big event after that is really that biennium budget being finalized by 7/1. We're all still eagerly anticipating that to happen. We have the final application due July 22nd. We will need to schedule the Grant Advisory Committee meeting to review the budget and narrative at the end of this meeting today to look at that final application. And then from there, we'll present it to the Criminal Justice Commission for their approval or authorization of the applications that you folks voted on moving forward, and then the project period begins either 7/1 or 10/1, depending on when folks choose. So that's just sort of a timeline. We'll get into more specifics towards the end of the meeting for that as well. But we're halfway in, we're partially way through the process, and I appreciate you guys all showing up. So again, the staff roles in the application process is really to review the applications for completeness, assess the adherence to program rules and priorities, and to ensure that you folks apply any program rules or preferences consistently across the board. So that's what our role really is going to be focused on today, is that presenting our analysis from the CJC staff review and then making sure the discussion is consistent and fair across applicants. That being said, there's always room for error. So if you folks notice us being inconsistent, please let us know that as well. This is definitely a process where we rely on each other. So your comments are always welcome too. So Grant Advisory Committee role in today is really to evaluate the applications, discuss them, and then approve which applications are sent to the commission for funding authorization. This last step is actually going to be dealt with during our next Grant Advisory Committee meeting, since we don't have the budgets today. We're just providing that feedback and discussion on those preliminary applications. And then, of course, the commission makes the ultimate funding decisions after we get through the final application. So, as I said, today's goals: review those preliminary applications and results from the staff analysis, document your questions and concerns, so we have those to send the applicants so they have the opportunity to revise their applications and respond to your comments and questions. And then I do want to know, it is providing feedback only today. The recommendations from you folks will occur during the next GAC meeting. So we are not voting on anything today. But at the same time, your feedback is extremely critical, especially for those applicants that may be newer or where there's questions about what they're proposing, so that they do have that opportunity to revise their final application. Please remember to ground your reviews in the grant purposes and requirements as outlined in the solicitation and rules. We also rely on the grant administration guide for rules and eligibility of allowable or prohibited activities. And there's a note later on in the presentation, but I'll just say it here too. We recently updated our grant administration guide, so there's a new link. No huge changes, but for applicants who may be, watching today or who we send feedback to, there have been some changes made to our grant administration guide. So please review those. Another thing that we need to keep in mind is the requirements, preferences, and RFGP criteria need to be applied consistently across all applications. And we can only look at those requirements and criteria listed in the solicitation. We can't add any new ones at this point. So we are documenting those, the questions and feedback, but they do need to be limited to information that was requested or discussed in that preliminary solicitation. We can't ask for new categories of information at this point. The evaluation of the application is also anchored in the responsiveness to the question, so how well they responded to what we are asking of them. As always, we want to note this is a competitive grant, and of course, please disclose, let staff know of any conflicts, and make sure that we're following ethical guidelines required by the state. So just to get more into that, grant advisory committee members are public officials, which means they have an ethical responsibility because they influence the operations of state government. And as such, CJC staff should be informed of any actual or potential conflicts. And those can occur when a public official participates in an action which would or could result in financial benefit or loss to either, the grant advisory committee member or their relative or business or something associated with them. So if you do have an actual or potential conflict, please disclose that relationship to staff and then exclude yourself from participating in any deliberations about those applications. We're not voting to approve or not approve an award today, but if we're having a discussion that could impact the funding and you may have a conflict, you can just choose to not participate in that discussion. And I did want to note, we have added, just based on how our CJC commission operates and to be consistent across grants, this final note here that when neither conflict exists, but a GAC member can also choose to abstain from any deliberation or vote due to a potential public perception of impropriety. So that's just in case you may have any kind of association. For example, our commission members tend to not deliberate or vote when anything is associated with the county that they may be, employed by, even if it's not the same agency, or their agency wouldn't directly benefit from a funding decision, just based on that potential public perception of impropriety. So we did want to throw that in, since that has been the practice of our commission. Uh, just a reminder, actual conflicts is occur when there's a public official making recommendations or decisions that would give the person or relative or business they are associated with a private monetary benefit or detriment. And that is an actual conflict. And then a potential conflict is when the decision or recommendation could give that person or somebody they're associated with a private monetary benefit or detriment. So there's a possibility of that gain or detriment. And I did not make this slide. It was Bridget, our former colleague, but I think this is a good note here. Anything Mr. Burns does, you should not do. So, any questions or concerns about the conflicts? We have noted, on each application where we thought a conflict existed for specific grant advisory committee members. Please feel free to jump in and let us know if there is one, or just abstain from the conversation. Like I said, we're not voting at this point, so it's a little bit different than usual. But I will, try and mention where a conflict exists for those specific applications where there's a direct relationship, and feel free to let us know as well, or abstain from the conversation. All right, so eligible applicants for this funding opportunity. The funding amount, again, is to be determined. Right now, it looks like it's $4 million, but just noted there, it's not confirmed yet. Eligible applicants include public or private entities that may apply separately or jointly. There's two types of programs for this particular solicitation. And those types of programs are established. So those are funds requested to build upon existing RJ programs, or implementation funds requested to build new programs. And I just want to note here that previously, with our kind of funding coming at different times, not with the regular biennium, and different considerations we have had in the past, the program types have formally been limited, like, for example, only existing applicants, or, only planning programs. So this is really open, much more open than the last few solicitations or supplementary funding rounds that we've had. So it's just those two program types that are defined. Grant program requirements. Hopefully these are very familiar to you all, tattooed on the back of your eyelids at this point. So grant programs must serve the definition of restorative justice established in the program rules, and that is a community-based alternative to the criminal and juvenile legal systems that aims to center the needs of the harmed party and foster accountability within the responsible party without resorting to incarceration or criminal conviction. I just want to make sure that definition is forefront in everyone's mind as we go through these applications today. Also, it must be a front-end program, which is pre-conviction, pre-adjudication, all these steps here in green that happen before the conviction and sentencing piece. So anything highlighted in green, RJ funds can fund. Anything in red with this stop stop sign shaped form here, we cannot fund. These grant program requirements are the same as they have been. Again, I'm not going to read through all of them. Hopefully they're familiar with you, but please just keep these in mind. Our comments and questions should directly relate to these things because these are the requirements to fund under this grant. There's also the program preferences. So these are different elements that you folks can decide to prioritize when approving applications, but they're not required for the program to be eligible for funding. And you'll see in our staff analysis that those are applied differently. I only want to note here that when you're applying preferences, it must be done uniformly across all applications the same. So just keep that in mind. Again, I'm not going to read through all of them because we'll get into, the specifics of each one more once we get into the applications themselves. Any questions or comments at this point? Okay, and we did have more folks sign on, and it looks like we do have quorum today. So thank you guys for joining us and taking the time this morning. We really appreciate it. So in our previous grant advisory committee meeting where we reviewed the application contents, the grant advisory committee members, you guys submitted some additional feedback and had some specific requests for things you wanted to see applicants include in their applications. And those things were training for staff and RJ facilitators, average number of staff hours for each participant case, community and system referral partners, what stage in the criminal justice system clients were referred, or the intervention point, as I'm calling it, as we move forward, the client eligibility criteria, the number of clients that were referred, served, and that successfully completed the program, challenges and barriers and how they were addressed, specifically related to enrollment, and then program performance data and outcomes achieved in the last biennium as applicable, based on whether the applicant was new or not. So these are all things that we discussed in that last grant advisory committee meeting and that were added into the application. So applicants could provide all that information. So, the applications were revised. This information will be highlighted on the slides that we go through. It is a lot of stuff. So it's a very dense amount of information that we're getting through today. And I'm going to try and keep the conversation rolling as we have in the past. But it's a lot. And hopefully we incorporated everything that was requested. We went back through the recording and the written notes that were sent to us. But we do really appreciate all the feedback we received. I want to note in general, actually, that the applications we received this time were some of our strongest that I've seen, not just in this grant, but across the board, especially for returning folks. So I again really just appreciate that feedback and that we were able to incorporate it into our application process, and I think it turned out very well. So thank you. So let's get into the review. I didn't put together a sample slide of what we're going to be going through, so please, on this first one, especially if there's information that you have questions about, feel free to shout out. And actually, we haven't done roll yet, and I apologize. So let's pause first before we get into the applications and do our roll call. Sorry about that. So Avery, if you don't mind doing roll.
Yes, of course. Tristan Edwards.
I'm here.
Kathleen Meehan-Coop.
Here.
Okay, Shannon Wilson has indicated she can't attend. Same with Carrie Naughton. So Simon Fulford.
I'm here.
Thank you. Brandon Brown.
I'm here.
Thank you. Elaine Walters.
I'm here.
Jimena Ospina Todd.
Here.
Thank you. And Michael Kaiser, who I don't believe is here. All right, we have quorum, so I'll pass it back to you, Rima.
Thank you, and thank you very much for reminding me so we didn't miss that. Um, okay, so let's get into the application review. So the staff analysis, similar to the last round that we did, it included a look at whether an applicant is eligible to receive funds based on the program rules and statute, whether it fits the definition of established or implementation, whether it meets the definition of restorative justice and is a front-end program, whether it responds to the RFGP criteria. In this case, since we're not looking at the budget, that was really around the program goals, objectives, and operations, and then how complete and responsive questions or the answers to questions were. And then we did look at the proposed program preferences as well. There were some themes overall that you'll see when we go through these slides. One is, there were still some questions or some more information that needs to be gathered on how participants will be screened to ensure the intervention will meet the definition of RJ. Specifically, it came up a lot in relation to folks that either are or planning to kind of shift to community referrals to make sure that incident or harm that initiated the contact or the request for service would qualify as a crime if it were reported to law enforcement, so that we have that criminal justice system linkage, right? And then another one was how the applicants program would support, sorry, there's sirens going off in the background. I hope folks can't hear it too much. Okay. How the applicants program will support impacted community members, how they will demonstrate coordination with community-based organizations. And these bullets, A and B on the right side of the slide here, are specifically related to that sample scoring sheet that we put together, where we were trying to sort of clarify and define what coordination with community-based organizations looks like operationally, how that really is, how people can demonstrate that really is part of their program. So those were some details that we came up with and included in that scoring sheet, and those included ongoing engagement with impacted community members, including avenues for community member feedback, and programs engagement with socially disadvantaged community members. And all of those items in that sample scoring sheet were developed for the most part previously with several years ago with feedback from the Grant Advisory Committee, and they were published on our website. So folks had that information prior to applying. It was more detailed than some of our questions have been previously, and I think some folks just missed all the different criteria. So I do want to know, especially for these ones where we saw them kind of across the board, that they weren't addressed in the answer. We didn't necessarily, there were so many subcomponents of the eligibility criteria in this application defined in that scoring sheet, especially for the preliminary applications, the first ones that we're going through that were higher scoring. If they missed one of these sub items, we didn't say, oh, you're not eligible. We're just providing feedback at this point. And there were so many, sorry, I'm struggling with how to explain this. There were so many sub-criteria listed on that scoring sheet that if they missed like 1 out of 5, we wouldn't say that they're not eligible. We kind of looked at it overall to make sure that overall, in general, they seem to be eligible based on all these different criteria, if that makes sense. Okay, I see nodding. So hopefully my all those words made sense. So those were the themes that we saw related to eligibility. There were some themes also related to just needing additional clarification. One was applicants marking they were both public and a nonprofit. So we just need to make them clarify whether they're a public agency or a nonprofit. And then specifically related to those questions about how many clients do you anticipate being referred during your biennium? How many do you anticipate serving or successfully completing the program? Those data questions, the way we worded it in the application was pretty ambiguous, especially for those new programs that are just trying to get funds to implement RJ now. So we're looking for some clarification across the board on those from those implementation programs, and that was completely on how we worded it. We didn't get the response we really were hoping for because of the wording. So that's also going to be noted on the slides, but just kind of a theme in general as we go through the applications. Any questions or concerns at this point? No? All right. So here on this slide, we just kind of transformed those points into feedback. So for each applicant, we'll have a slide with suggested general feedback that you folks can look at, read through, add to, or disagree with as needed. And this is just kind of a sample of what you're going to see. These are the common ones based on those themes that you'll see over and over again. Like describe how participants will be screened or explain what data outcomes you anticipate gathering or achieving in the next biennium. So here is an overview of the applications we received. So again, overall, folks did really well. We're not going to look at, here's a breakout of the staff scoring. The ones in the blue tables are folks that we generally consider to be eligible, but maybe we need some more information on specific points. And then just how the scoring work out there. And then the ones in the red/yellow table are ones that we felt those mandatory items may not have been met. They need to provide a lot more information along with their budget to be considered eligible for funding. And Elaine, it looks like you had a question.
Yeah, what was the total possible points from your perspective?
Great question. So there were 65 points for that narrative section, plus we had additional points for the 7 priority items. So the total was 65, and then they had the option of getting points on top of that for if they met any priorities or
Thank you.
program preferences. Yeah, excuse me. And again, so we're not discounting anyone at this point. This kind of just shows how responsive they were, how well they addressed those eligibility and mandatory criteria based on the staff review. And what level of feedback and additional information they can expect to provide at this point. As I said, we're just jumping right in. So if you have questions about anything on the slide, especially for this first one, let me know. And Kathleen, it looks like you have a hand up. Your microphone's off, but it looked like you were saying you have a conflict. So
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for pointing that out. So I'm going to say some information verbally. The information on the slides is really what focused on what you folks requested in that, as additional items in the application. So So let me just go ahead and jump in. So the service area for our first applicant, Deschutes County Early Adult Program, is Deschutes County, also residents of Crook and Jefferson who are associated with crimes that occur in Deschutes. The program description is it's a community-based alternative to prosecution that provides an opportunity for participants to take accountability and repair harm through restorative justice, and also to divert young adult cases from traditional prosecution, strengthen restorative practices, and improve participant preparedness. It is an established program, so it is currently being funded now. For staff training, they do a full team kickoff and core training and ongoing professional development. The average number of hours per case is about 70 to 80 hours. They get referrals through restorative, or they provide referrals to Restorative Justice and Equity and Thrive Central Oregon for their CBO partnership component. This is a pre-charge intervention and that occurs when law enforcement submits a police report to the DA, and the participant eligibility requirements are that the participant is 18 to 25 years old, and it excludes domestic violence, major 11 offenses, and driving while suspended or driving with a suspended license. So those are some general information about the program. We said overall that they they seem to be meeting the eligibility requirements and grant purposes and requirements, but there is a few little bits of additional information that they could provide. They met the RFG criteria, and they did answer yes to all seven of those preferences. So again, their current and established program, they provided a definition of successful completion, which is that the responsible party has accountability. They complete a restorative justice agreement over 6 months. They have no new criminal charges, and they participate in meetings and contacts. So I'm just going to point out here that these tables are going to change based on whether or not they're an existing grantee, an established program, or an implementation program. So the information in them changes a little bit. For example, for Deschutes EAP, we have the current award and the percentage expended as of April 25th. And they have the number of self-reported clients that were submitted as part of the application. And you have a question again, Elaine?
Yeah, can you explain the current award number? I'm just confused by where the commas are.
So it's 1,500,000. Oh, yeah, we're missing a digit. You are correct, and I apologize. So it should, on the end of that number,
I have a 0. Okay.
Have a, let's see, total. Oops. Yeah, have another digit, and I apologize for that.
It's okay. I just wanted to understand. Thank you.
All right, need to fix that. Slide 23. Okay. And the percentage expended is as of the end of the last quarter. So the information is going to change slightly depending on what type of applicant they are. For the current applicants, we do have this column down here called cases submitted to CJC. So this is information that's pulled from our reports, our quarterly reports that we get from our grantees. And this was really, it started out as just a data check. I wanted to include it because there are some discrepancies that may be due to various factors. Some applicants submitted numbers that include harm party as well as just number of cases, which might account for some of the differences. We said biennium. We didn't define exactly when that was, and especially with our existing folks, there's some bleed from one biennium to another because we've had this strange contract period. So some of the numbers look different because of that. Also, just inconsistent reporting quarter to quarter. I don't want to, obviously, this is not the time for an in-depth conversation about why those differences are happening, but I did just want to include this because these are only 3 data points. There are 3 data points that you folks requested us include in this analysis. And quite a few of you are yourselves grantees. And even with folks where the data is consistent, like Deschutes, where, are the numbers that we saw are the same as the numbers that they saw, there's a piece of information that's not getting submitted to us at all. It just wasn't included in our initial conversations about the data reporting. So I guess we've had this conversation kind of ongoing for the last few meetings about building some kind of performance metrics, looking at the data more closely. So we have that solid basis to show legislators, this is what we are achieving. And just based on this review of 3 data points, we have some work to do. So I just wanted to point that out here, that this is going to be, still an ongoing conversation. And especially right now, we're talking about funding, and in the next biennium, it's going to be a focus for us to make sure that we have that information that even you yourselves are requesting, to see how well these programs are doing and to really be able to highlight the good work that we know is happening. So that's kind of a long aside, but I just wanted to note that in this case, the numbers add up. We're just the number referred is blank because we're not collecting that information in our current quarterly reporting. But that is something that maybe we should talk about adding. So Deschutes provided a couple of challenges that they faced, particularly with enrollment. The first one was a two-track program model that resulted in delays getting participants into restorative dialogues. They also noted a challenge with engaging harm parties. So in response to that, what they're trying to do is transition from a 2-track program to a unified process and expand outreach to harm parties, and offer stipends, doing a video model and increasing touch points to help engage those harm parties. Any questions or comments about this slide or anything on the previous slide? Sorry, I know that was a lot of stuff to go over. And hopefully we'll get a little more efficient as we move forward. So for this particular applicant, we just have 2 items of suggested applicant feedback. One or both related to those eligibility criteria, like sub points that I mentioned. One is to have them describe how your program supports ongoing engagement with impacted community members, and another was to describe the engagement with socially disadvantaged community members. So this is your now opportunity to discuss this application, make any comments, and also confirm whether or not you think this feedback should be given to them. Add or remove feedback as you see fit, and then ask any questions that you might have. Anything for Deschutes, our first applicant?
This is Simon, seeing as everyone else is silent. I just simply think it's a strong application, strong demonstration of the previous biennium and the use of funds establishing the program. I think that's some good feedback. Appreciate your scoring and analysis. And certainly, I don't quite remember what our role is here, but if it's recommending that they go forward with budgeting, I would certainly want that to happen. No concerns.
Okay, thank you for the feedback. And just to respond to that last comment, so today we are providing feedback and questions to the applicants. so they can incorporate that or respond to that in their final application. We're not doing any voting on funding at this point. And since some of these, concerns have to do with eligibility, we're not looking at that either. We're giving them the opportunity to respond to all of this before we make those determinations about what applications move on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Especially as we move forward with our application review, there's going to be a lot on these slides. I'm not going to read everything on those suggested applicant feedback slides. I'll just pause for a moment so you folks can look it over, see if anything's missing, see if you want to add anything or take anything off. And we'll just do consensus by way of no objection, since we're not actually voting. So if nobody says anything for a couple minutes, we'll just consider the feedback okay and move on, if everyone is all right with that. And Elaine, it looks like your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this was the first application that I read and I know there's some others that that referred to the reduction of stress on the court system, on the justice system, and I really appreciated that a lot. I thought this was a really well-written, concisely described program, and I really appreciated the very systemic look at where the impacts might show up and the benefits might show up.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, if there are no additions or subtractions to the suggested applicant feedback, I'm going to assume it's okay and move on. All right. Oh, Simon?
As you move on, yeah, just a note to all my fellow attendees. I'm on my phone. I spent 20 minutes trying to get Teams to start and it wouldn't do it. So I apologize. I can't see everyone. And then, so if I interrupt you, my apologies in advance.
Thank you. And we saw your note. Your your complaint is logged. Okay, so the next highest scoring application in this preliminary review was Restorative Roots project. So their service area is Multnomah County for their SAP or program. They discuss two separate programs here, SAP and then community referral. So for their SAP program, it's Multnomah County. For community referral, it's Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas counties. The program description is that the SAP program is a survivor-centered alternative to prison, and that is a collaboration with Metropolitan Public Defender, or MPD, and the Multnomah County District Attorney to address certain person felony offenses through community-based RJ processes. And their proposed program includes an expansion to include community referral pathway where there is no engagement with law enforcement or where there's a civil compromise available. And their goal is to reduce instances of violence in the community, demonstrate the efficacy of RJ when applied to higher level offenses, expand restorative justice within the Portland metro area. And for staff training, they provide continuous training and support. They average 216 hours per case for their SAP program and 64 for their community referrals so far. As I mentioned, their referral partners are Multnomah County District Attorney's Office and MPED. And then Constructing Hope, Help, and other CBOs for their community referral component. Their intervention point is pre-indictment or later, or pre-arrest or pre-conviction, or even before law enforcement intervention for that community referral piece. I apologize. I'm struggling with my words this morning. We did notice there were some additional bits of information they could provide to make sure that they really addressed every single component that we asked for. But overall, they met eligibility and grant purposes and requirements based on our preliminary review. They met the RFGP criteria, and they did, say yes that they meet 7 out of 7 of those preferences as well. Their participant eligibility requirements for the SAT program are violent felony cases, and for the community referral, it's all crime types that can be dismissed through civil compromise. Any questions or comments on this overview slide? Okay. Oh, Elaine, it looks like you have a question.
I'm going to make comments all the way through if it's okay, just because I did my little homework. And
We appreciate you doing your homework.
no, this one is really powerful. It's I really appreciated the estimate of time hours involved. I think it's significantly higher than most of the others, but I think it really matches the violent felony cases that they're willing to take on. I'm really excited to see more of that happening. I also really appreciated, and this was hard for us to figure out the last year and a half or so, the community referral types of cases being sort of an intervention inflection point. And so I'm really glad to see that that's been sort of expanding in a number of these applications. So just very interested. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And actually, I just realized that I forgot to mention the potential conflict as well. I believe one of our GAC members, Brandon, is associated with this application. So
Yes, I am.
okay, thank you for confirming. So just making note of that. And then Elaine, you had another hand up.
Sorry, Rima, I also conflict myself off this
Oh, and
application.
Tristan has a conflict as well. Thank you, Tristan.
I think the last thing I wanted to just note is the engagement of the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, how that has been a really big sticky wicket for a long time. So that it seems like there's been some movement there, and I'm also looking forward to hearing more about that.
Excellent. All right, so let's move on to the second slide. So I have the correct number of digits this time, so we're off to a better start. So here's their current funding, 93% expended. I do want to note here, so this is a new applicant that's associated with an existing grantee, a new applicant, and an established program. So it's a little bit weird. This funding amount is actually to our existing grantee and not directly to this applicant. But I wasn't able to kind of break that out very reliably. So we included the full amount, but that full amount is not going to Restorative Roots, this applicant. It goes to our current grantee, Insight Alliance. So I apologize for that little bit of confusion there, but we did just want to show the overall amount and the percentage expended to make the comparison consistent across those existing programs, even though this is a new applicant. So I apologize for that bit of confusion there. Their definition of success is a full program participation, development of trust-based relationships, stabilization, lower levels of reoffense, increased feeling of safety and satisfaction. And here are the numbers that were self-reported to us. They reported both cases and people. The cases submitted to CJC is just cases, so that's part of the reason those numbers are different. It does not include a count of harmed and responsible parties, which I believe this 33 people does, although there were some discrepancies in the addition in their application too, so we are following up on that. But just a side note, again, those numbers are different, and I think it's important that we revisit the data at this point, so we can easily know we're getting consistent answers to these kind of basic questions. So it's a new established program. Challenges that they mentioned were slow referrals from MCDA and engaging harmed parties. In response to those challenges, they're renegotiating their MOU with MCDA and diversifying their referral stream with that community referrals pathway and doing outreach, and they're also conducting trainings. Any questions or comments on this information? No. All right. So our suggested feedback is just to, include a little bit more detail on how those community referral participants will be screened to ensure the intervention meets the definition of RJ. So again, that they're, happening at that beginning point before conviction, which sounds like they are, and also just to make sure that those that the reason for service for those clients is something that would be considered a crime, that so that they are getting diverted from the criminal justice system. And Kathleen, it looks like you have a hand up.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I was figured I would wait till the end when you were done, but I guess my one question, I was a little confused reading the proposal and would like some more information on what happens to the engaged participants if they don't successfully complete the program, whether from a community standpoint or a system-based referral, kind of what is the aftermath for somebody if they don't complete? And I also had some questions about their timelines, which I see you have noted there.
Yes. So thank you for that. So I'll just, since this feedback is specific to this applicant, we also noted that there was some confusion on whether they're a public entity or nonprofit. They said yes to both, so we need clarity on that. We were going to ask them to revise the number of cases / people served, since that didn't quite add up. And then, as you mentioned, the suggested feedback include provide a timeline of milestones and major activities that will be completed by quarter for the biennium. Did you have anything specifically to add to that last bullet point, Kathleen, or does that cover your questions? Okay. All right. So anything else that folks wanted to say about this application, or, feedback or questions that you had?
This is Simon. Sorry again. I think a recommendation or request to get an update on the MCDA MOU, because that seems pretty pivotal to the ongoing success or not of those types of referrals and the target of this program. I think it should be noted that this is, I think, the only proposal and funded project that really specifically calls out those very high, I guess, high levels of crime, interpersonal violence, Measure 11, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's great and really is the very top end or whatever of the intent of the Restorative Justice Grant Program. I guess the kind of flip side of that is the question on the numbers. And I'd love to see a bit more specifics on maybe it's that last point on the plan and what that would look like going forwards in the next biennium if they were funded.
So what their estimated number of people served would be, or cases? Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was teased out if the community referrals are also targeting that sort of high levels of harm thresholds or not.
So for the community referrals, they did say, cases for crimes that could be solved through civil, but we can definitely ask that question and see if they have more information to provide. So any additional comments or questions, things to add or remove from their feedback?
Hi, this is Kathleen again. I guess to echo a little bit of what Simon was saying, maybe a percentage of what percentage of the cases may be community referral versus which may be system-based. And it also might be a little helpful. They had a very impressive number of prison time and the amount of money saved, but it would be interesting to understand where they got those numbers from. Is it presumptive prison time? What the actual costs are? That would be helpful to have some additional information on that as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anything else? Oh, Elaine?
Yeah, am I correct to notice that there were some things that this project is proposing for post-incarceration or reentry? Or was that also in there?
We can Was there a specific question that you had on that?
Well, I'm just sort of reading back through my own notes, and so I'll come back with that. I know that that's been something that we've talked a lot about in the prevention of new crimes, or if there's been new crime sort of committed post incarceration. So I'll find it and come back to it. Yeah.
Okay. I can check my notes real quick, but
I'm not remembering that from this application personally, although I had to read some of them quickly and then go back and look at lots of my notes, but that's not jumping out to my memory on this one.
we can make note of it as a I don't see anything in my notes either, but we can make note of it as a comment to include if applicable, to get more clarity on that. And if it with our next read through doesn't pop up, we'll just leave that comment off if that's okay. Okay. Excellent. All right, then moving to the next one. So the next program applying is Center for Mediation and Dialogue, or CMD, as I have been calling it. I don't have any conflicts noted on this one, so please let me know if that's not the case. The service area is the Beaverton Municipal Court, or cases that go through the Beaverton Municipal Court, primarily for victims and offenders living in Beaverton and Washington County, and residents whose cases are there. The program description is to create an adult restorative justice diversion program for criminal cases prosecuted through Beaverton Municipal Court with the intent to model an RJ path for all adult criminal cases in Washington County eventually. Staff training is 35 hours of foundational RJ 101 and then ongoing professional development in topic areas related to RJ. The number of cases per hour is estimated at 16. As mentioned, the referral partners are Beaverton Municipal Court or City Prosecutor's Office, and those would be pre-ticket deferred prosecution or deferred judgment cases, and participant eligibility. So this is an implementation program, so they're kind of working through some of those eligibility requirements, but their initial look would be to focus on those 1,600 misdemeanor cases that are filed annually through Beaverton Municipal Court. They generally met the criteria and preferences and requirements with some additional information, and they self-identified as meeting 6 out of 7 of those preferences. Any questions about just this preliminary information? No? All right. So for them, they are a current implementation program. So they're actually a planning grantee right now. Their initial award is $26,600. I just want to note that it was a very short project period, and this only represents 1/4 out of their award period, but they are expending money, basically. Their definition of successful completion is that the responsible party completes all obligations, including the accountability contract, and they participate in a completion circle. They estimate that they will have 30 to 50 cases referred to them. They will serve 30 to 50 cases, and 80 to 95% of those cases will be completed. The challenges that they anticipate are building trust with partners, coordinating their referral stream, accessibility of services, and ensuring that there are adequate volunteers to provide their services. And the response that they are planning is, engagement of an advisory group, training all of their partner agencies, ongoing efforts to diversify staff and volunteers to make sure that the services are accessible, and then doing a lot of work onboarding and mentoring new volunteers to make sure they have enough folks on board. Any questions or comments on this slide? We'll move on to the suggested feedback. The only one to call out here that isn't noted on those themes is the describe the client onboarding process. We felt that question, more information could be provided in response to that question. Any discussion for this applicant? Kathleen?
It would be helpful for me, especially since this is a brand new program or pretty new program, the fact that the goals weren't very measurable. And that came up from the standpoint when I was reading through, they have a very impressive plan for a high number of cases as well as a high success rate. But also when you note some of their potential challenges, my concern was like, will those actually be achievable? So that was a little bit kind of maybe a little bit more information around how they plan to overcome some of those challenges to meet their high goals.
Thank you. And Elaine?
Similar feedback, also just the I'm really appreciative of it being a municipal focus and working with the municipal court. I think that's interesting and very positive. Also was just looking at the work and barrier load to the number of hours. Just thinking about that as well. And I also wanted to strike my comments from the last proposal, the Restorative Roots program. I was completely wrong. It was a note for something totally different. So please accept my apology and strike that from any worry. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Was there, so in terms of the work compared to number of hours, would you just like more information on what that looks like, or was there a specific question?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the range in all of these proposals is really incredibly wide. And the one that makes the most sense is the one that really sort of broke down the number of hours to sort of how did they come to that estimate? And why. And so if you take out the Restored Roots program and the working with higher level crimes or harms, and then just look at the range for everybody else that are not doing that, it's extremely wide. So this is a learning process, and so who knows where it will actually land, but just clarity around those numbers would be great.
Thank you for providing that additional information. And I do want to note, since that sounded like a comment that could apply to multiple applicants, we can, if you just make note of which applicants you want to get that information from, we can just make that kind of a general feedback point for the applicants that you think it applies to.
Yeah, thank you. I think we tend to underestimate sometimes to try to get the funding, and we'd rather really have full information.
You? Any other? And Kathleen, it looks like you have another.
Yeah, I think I would appreciate a little more information from this proposal on what type of support services they might be able to provide, as well as I'm trying to read my notes here. The post. Sorry, you'll have to come back to me. I'm to reread my notes here. Sorry.
No worries. So we'll pause here and see if anyone else has comments or feedback.
Just Simon, they said no on the question about addressing case types with a presumptive prison sentence. And I guess I just wanted to double check that or clarify if there was any clarification on that.
Okay.
Just last comment. I really appreciated the idea of training law enforcement to do some stand-in work I found that really intriguing, the idea of actually having law enforcement engaging even when the cases aren't necessarily their cases, but also sometimes when they are. So I thought that was a unique aspect.
Sorry, I'd also just like to say I thought this was a very detailed, logical, kind of experienced proposal. Clearly did a good use of the planning grant funding to I think get a lot of system partners and buy-in. So I wanted to appreciate that.
Jimena here. I also have in my notes here that I really appreciate the engagement, deep engagement with law enforcement and leveraging those relationships to transform systems, and that they are willing to do a pilot with the specific communities, that they are, even though they're not providing specific numbers, they're doing piloting with specific communities. They're proposing that in their language. And that this planning grant is being conformed by a multidisciplinary team as well, not just their own agency.
Thank you. And just to go back to, sorry, Simon's comment, we want to make sure that we have the notes correct. Was the question, have them confirm whether they exclude the case types with presumptive prison cases, and if not, provide additional information? Does that cover your concern, Simon?
No, not that whether they didn't say they exclude them. It was more, is it true that the case types would not have a presumptive prison sentence, or the other way around, is would some of them have a presumptive prison sentence?
I
didn't see that
chime in
conclusion.
quickly. Yeah, just wanted to chime in quickly here, and I think it's a question worth asking, but I also think that the nature of municipal courts is that they typically handle misdemeanor cases.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
I guess the other comment that I wanted to make, and to but to also support some of the comments that have made, this was a strong proposal and I enjoyed reading it. And I'm happy to see that they want to move in this direction. My only other comment was maybe to provide a little bit more information on how they would support the harm parties.
Okay. All right. I don't hear anyone else or see any other hands. So, we have that captured, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the next applicant. So the next applicant is Lutheran Community Services Northwest. Any conflicts that we should note here? I didn't have anything written down, but in case we do, no. All right, so their service area is Portland Metro and Multnomah County, including Portland, Gresham, and surrounding communities. Their program is to provide an RJ pathway designed to divert individuals from the traditional criminal justice system in collaboration with Portland Police Bureau and MCDA. They included a whole bunch of goals, including, reducing criminal justice system involvement, supporting harm parties, building community trust. There are 7 of them altogether. They listed that they had 40 hours of foundational training for staff and 3 months intensive and ongoing skill building with a structured learning path for their staff training. The average number of cases per hour, or hours per case, is 110. In addition to Portland Police Bureau and MCDA, they are working on developing relationships with the Portland area school districts and community stakeholders for referral partners. And the point of intervention for them is pre or post arrest from Portland Police Bureau and pre-adjudication from MCDA. The participant eligibility requirements include youth and adults who caused harm through misdemeanors and felonies, including certain violent felonies. And the participation must be voluntary, and they must acknowledge the harm and take accountability. Overall, they met, the grant purposes and requirements as far as that preliminary review is concerned, and they stated they meet 7 out of 7 of those preferences. They are a current established grantee, so we do have their current award number and the expenditure amount there. They're at 51% expended. Their definition of successful completion is the RP acknowledges role in causing harm and completes all steps in their reparative actions. There were some, so the number of referred and served that they submitted were 12, with half of them completing. There were some discrepancies in the data that we received from them, and part of that is just it needs follow up on their reporting on our side to get clarity, and there were some issues with consistency as well, so that's been noted. The challenges they ran into were shifting culture of law enforcement, staffing and staff tension with law enforcement partners, turnover at Portland Police Bureau, and then funding disruptions. And their response to that was to conduct targeted officer outreach and training, restructuring the staff model and hiring practices, reestablish and streamlining their referral system, and then expanding to community-based referrals as well. Questions or comments before we move on to the recommended feedback?
I have a comment that is, I think applies to a lot of the different programs, and that comes when we're determining whether like the preferences have been met.
Yeah.
I think that there is perhaps some clarity that is needed around some of those preferences. For example, when Lutheran says that they are willing to take violent felony cases, what does that mean? Have they taken a violent felony case? Is that for and I guess with this program in specific, they've got a lot of different referral pathways that they're talking about. So I think it could, for this program, it might just be clarification. But for other programs, I kind of was left with this question of, let's take, for example, like, violent felonies. Is the program saying they're willing to take violent felonies, or is violent felonies actually reasonably going to happen for this program? I think that there were some programs that were saying, yeah, we would take violent felonies, but their referral partner may never send them a violent felony or may never be willing to send a violent felony. And so does that really mean that their program takes violent felonies? I think the same thing extends to kind of criminal history exclusions. Maybe the community-based organization isn't going to exclude anybody based on their criminal history, but is their single referral partner excluding people based on their criminal history? And so I think that for some of these preferences, I was left wondering, are they talking about their own willingness, or are they talking about what is realistic within the parameters of the program that they have set up? So that was kind of a general question that I had for a lot of the programs.
Okay, thank you for that. And sorry, Elaine is.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that the ability to demonstrate the capacity that goes with the willingness is important to me. So being able to check the box is really different than showing it in the description of how those cases will be handled or how those preferences will be managed when they're met, if and when they're met. And I noticed that in some of the places where there was the possibility of taking more rural folks, for example. So the partnerships didn't reflect partnership with folks that might refer from rural communities. So it's just similarly, what's the backup for meeting those preferences within the application or within the proposal or the program?
Thank you for that. So for the preferences, we didn't highlight as much staff suggested feedback because they were kind of outside of those mandatory items. So For the ones that you think that those comments apply to, since they were for multiple applications, can you please just flag it and let us know that that same, question applies for that applicant? So our feedback was really around the community referral, or the suggested feedback, excuse me, was really around that those community referral participants, and making sure that the expansion to individuals on probation and parole and youth participants, that those folks will be screened to ensure that the intervention meets the definition of restorative justice. So again, that they be diverted from the criminal justice system, that those incidents that bring them into service are actually crimes, and that they're at that pre um, pre-incarceration point, pre-adjudication point. So besides the comment about the the willingness versus realism, or realistic ability within the parameters of the program they set up to meet those preferences, and the ability to demonstrate, were there any additional points of feedback for Lutheran Community Services? And it looks like, Tristan, I see your hand up first, so I'll go to you.
So for this first bullet point, it was my understanding, and I still think we should ask this question, but I just wanted to kind of tell you what I read from the application. I believed when I read the application that the description of the post-adjudication restorative justice was to speak to kind of their experience and their ability to handle these kinds of cases, not that would be what they're doing under this grant, since it is back end. I still think the question is worth asking. I just wanted to say that's how I read it. I am curious to know from the Portland Public School collaboration or potential collaboration, how that, and maybe that's what you meant. Is that what you meant by community referral participant, the Portland Public School element?
It was, yeah, anyone that was not coming through those named referral partners that they have established already, basically.
Okay, yeah, I had read that to, I think the only specific one, if I'm remembering correctly, that they had mentioned was Portland Public Schools, and I had the same question about whether that is, purporting to do school-based RJ, or if it is seeking to intervene in cases that are criminal harms.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. And Kathleen?
I think my comment refers to a lot of the proposals, is that a lot of people had they had solid goals from the standpoint that I understood what they were trying to get at. But one thing that seemed to be missing from the majority of the proposals was the goals being measurable. Things like, we're going to increase capacity, but what does that actually look like? We're going to empower the community. How do we actually measure that so we can track success? And I understand that for, particularly for implementation sites, that sometimes that's difficult to know what that might look like, but even putting some sort of target number, and I mean, having run a lot of programs over the years, you don't have to have a success rate of 90% for a program to be successful, and not to overstate those, but to really realistically, if you increase something by 10 or 20%, that can have a huge impact. And so that was some of the challenges I read through a lot of the proposals, this being one of them. And they had a nice list of potential goals, but I couldn't measure them. So I'd like to see that, and generally across the board. And my other question, while reading this proposal, which I also liked, was a better understanding, and that may come out in the budget, but a better understanding of the amount of staff time. Was it 6 full-time staff? Is it part-time? When we're looking at about, I think, what was it, 20 cases maybe? Over a period of time, I would kind of, a little bit more information on that would be helpful. So they've served 12, and I think some of their goals were I think they were trying to get 20, I think. I could be wrong on that.
And you're saying based on some more clarity based on the number of hours that they're estimating per case?
Yeah.
And the total number of staff that they're including. Okay. All right.
Simon here. Definitely echo Kathleen on some of the specifics around, measurable goals measurable goals. And again, I also echo that across several of the applicants, particularly for programs that look like they're building on something that exists. They're already funded through other funding mechanisms to do X, and they want to do more of that. So I would say yes. I think the question is around if there can be follow-up with the MCDA and Portland Police Bureau, those MOUs. I think those that system partnership will kind of make or break that aspect of this proposal. So I think a request for further information, further confirmation, whatever that can or should look like.
Okay. Can add that. And looks like Mano, you have a hand up as well.
Yes, I do. I wanted to share that I appreciated from this application how they explain their shift in hiring practices and how they've created pay grades for their staff. And yeah, I really like that. I also like how they clearly outline program completion looks like, even if they didn't determine specific like numbers, but they did define what completion looked like. I would have liked to see some letters of commitment from PPS specifically. It seemed like there was a lot from ceasefire, which is after DCJ, also after the district attorney after too. So yes, it feels like the school component is missing if that's what's going to happen. But overall, I really like the staff training, the in-depth work to create pay grades, pay scales within their internal structures, and the description of their program, what program completion looks like for them.
Thank you for your comments. And it looks like Kathleen and then Elaine both have their hands up.
I just wanted to say too that I went back through another section of my notes for this proposal, and I realized the 20 cases was actually related to one of their referral pieces, and that their overall goal is about 60 to 100 cases annually. So realize my error on that. That being said, one of the other comments I wanted to make was that it would be helpful to get just a little bit more information in the proposal about what their process looked like, how long somebody would be in the program, what the dialogues, just a little bit more information about what their restorative process and the program steps would look like. That would be helpful as well.
Okay. And then Elaine.
Yes, I actually sort of echo what a lot of other folks have already said, so I'll skip that, but also appreciated the listing and the nature of the evidence-based practices that they were talking about. Also appreciate this application and several others for really noting the work to change the norms within policing and within community understanding. So everywhere there's work to sort of engage and educate and partner with organizations that really make a difference in how we see this work and how it's presented to potential participants as well as the wider community to build trust around how this supports public safety. So I really appreciated that sort of focus of this project, of this application.
Thank you for those comments. So I just want to confirm the feedback for this applicant that we have so far. Explain if referral partners will refer violent felonies and those with a criminal history, demonstrate the program's capacity to accept those violent felony cases. The question about how they will measure the goals to be able to track success, clarify that the school referrals are for actions that could be crimes rather than just school-based issues, provide more information on what the RJ process or program steps look like and how long someone is in the program, and then provide an update on the status of any MOUs with MCDA and law enforcement agency partners. Does that capture everything that we discussed, or am I missing something?
How about Rima, the MOU with PPS?
An MOU with PPS as well. Okay. Thank you. All right. So there's no additional feedback for this one. We'll go ahead and move on. So the next applicant is Center for Dialogue and Resolution. Their service area excuse me, sorry, their service area is Lane, Douglas, and Coos County. Their program is a restorative justice program that operates in partnership with Lane County Circuit Court and Division of Youth Services, with a recent expansion to Douglas and Coos counties. And their goal is to match or exceed their current RJ programming and replicate the work that they're currently doing in Lane and Douglas counties, and then finish developing their assessment model to better measure the impacts of their program. Staff training was noted as 20 hours of RJ facilitator training, 32 hours basic mediation training, and there's also experienced trainers on staff for those ongoing training needs. Average hours of case is 10 to 14 hours per case for at minimum for adults, and 8 to 16 hours for youth. Their referral partners are Lane County Circuit Court, Lane County Youth Services Division, and then they also mentioned a referral pathway through University of Oregon and Douglas and Coos juvenile courts that's being developed. Their intervention point is pre-citation or pre-charge when they're trying to expand to post-adjudication. And their participant eligibility requirements are misdemeanors and felonies, excluding cases involving stalking and youth sexual assault or weapons cases. So they generally, met the purposes and requirements and criteria, and they self-identified as meeting 6 out of 7 of those RJ preferences. So they are a current established program, about 70% expended their funds so far. Definition of successful completion for them is the responsible party follow-through and completion of the reparations agreement, increased social connections and understanding of personal goals. They self-reported serving 175 clients and 166 completed. We're following up with them currently. There have been some discrepancies in their data reporting, especially with a turnover in executive staff right now. So we're revisiting that. So that just wanted to note that could be part of the reason for the difference in numbers there. Their challenges that they noted were inconsistent referral communication from Lane Youth Services Division due to staffing shortages and restructuring, and then also decreased referrals from Lane Circuit Court. They are in the process of negotiating a new MOU with the Youth Services Division in response to that. And they're doing regular meetings and presentations with Lane Circuit Court to help with increasing those referrals. So I'll just pause here so you folks can read the suggested applicant feedback and then have your conversation about this application.
Rena, This may be a different way of asking the same question you have already asked, that first
Okay.
question. I guess it was not clear to me that they were actually asking for funding for those elements of their program. I guess I took it the same way as the Lutheran program talking about their post-adjudication program. I thought that CDR was just offering, the Title IX and post-adjudication victim offender services up as, evidence that they have, that they are qualified to do this work, or that they do this work in other areas. So I guess a question, maybe a precursor question to your first question is, are you asking to have the Title IX and post-adjudication services covered as part of this grant? And if so, how do they meet the definition?
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for this application? Elaine?
It may be more than just this application, but when we're looking at the data that's been reported on the planning and the implementation components that some of our folks are making, we don't see any information about the kind of cases that they handled. Those are pretty high numbers of cases that were handled during that time period compared to some of the other reports, and also very low number of hours in the engagement. So I just want to understand how those go together. Yeah. I just want more clarity about that. And I know because that the challenges for referrals around more serious cases are an issue in counties all over the state. So that type of case question stands for me in a lot of these conversations. We want to, we're willing to, but are we able to, and do we handle those more serious cases with presumptive prison sentences, for example?
Okay, Kathleen?
My comment actually also has to deal with a number of the proposals as well. When we ask everyone about, do you provide support services after somebody graduates? We don't have an opportunity to allow people to elaborate on that. And I think that can vary dramatically on what that actually looks like. Those kind of support services, particularly for anybody who may be the harm party or the responsible party. And so I don't know if that's something we can ask for now, because we didn't ask for a lot of detail, but that was something I was left with a big question mark when I read through a lot of the proposals. What does that look like?
Okay, let me look at that specific question. So for these comments that are kind of applying broadly along with our staff themes, we have a few items that we kind of just are going to include in all of the feedback emails. So some of these things that folks are noting, apply to multiple programs, if it's kind of, or multiple applicants, if it's kind of just broad feedback across everyone, we can just include it in that like section of general feedback for all applicants, if that makes sense. To respond to the second part of that, we did not have an open-ended answer to that our clients offered support services after they graduate. So I think we're going to put that as a note for maybe next time, rather than asking for additional information with this application.
That makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Simon here again. I'd like some clarity on the numbers served again, because this is building on the grant helped build on an existing sort of referral process with the courts, and the distinction between are those numbers on top of that kind of pre-grant caseloads. Yeah, and what's that balance in the numbers of cases they've served, and then going forwards.
That was exactly my feedback. I can't tell by the numbers which ones were served and which ones are projected service numbers. And that's true across these grant applications because the way it was written. But just where you had to put in a number, what are those numbers, and some way to distinguish. And to be fair, some people got very, very clear about exact numbers in their narrative, I think because they noticed that need also. So there were some that actually did a really solid job of telling us what the difference was, but it wasn't necessarily intuitive for them. So
Right. And I apologize on our behalf. Part of that was due to the wording of those questions getting kind of smushed together for existing and implementation programs. So they did, provide those self-reported number of clients there, and then we have the 117 cases submitted to CJC that we were able to confirm. Like I said, there's been some conversation around their data that we're having, and we're trying to get some cleanup to occur on that. But it does give you some idea of volume, but we can certainly ask for more clarification as well. And we have, you have your hand up as again.
I do, and this is going back to Kathleen's comment about the if clients are served after program completion. And Rima, you were making note for next round of applications that if you are going, or if you are going to be asking grantees or applicants to submit description on services being provided after program completion, I would ask that funds be given for that, or that there are funds to come with that, that we should not be asking people to do services if we're not going to be funding those.
Okay.
That there is a line item for that, if that services, if people are going to be evaluated and on that.
Thank you for that feedback. So for this applicant, the feedback we have is to provide a breakdown of staff hours per case, explain if referral partners will refer violent felonies and those with criminal history, demonstrate the program's capacity to accept those cases, and then clarify what cases have been served and which are projected to be served, in addition to what's on this slide. So is there anything else that folks want to add? Does that capture the discussion? Okay. I see nodding and no additional hands up. So we'll say that that one is covered, and move on to the next one. So let's see. The next one is Six Rivers. So we have been going at this for about an hour and 40 minutes at this point. We can take a break now, take a break after this application is done. Just a quick 5 minutes in case folks want to, grab something to drink or something like that, or we can power it on through. It's really up to you guys. We're about halfway through the presentation at this point. Do we want to take a break? Quick 5 minutes?
Either a break now or after Six Rivers, I don't mind.
Okay.
Why don't we make it through Six Rivers and then take a break?
All right, sounds great. So I didn't have any conflicts noted for this one. So please correct me if that is incorrect. The service area here is Hood River and Wasco counties along Columbia River. They're looking to expand to Gilliam and Sherman and Wheeler. And they also note Washington state if funding ever becomes available. So just that Columbia Gorge River area. The goals are to reduce the number of people involved in the criminal justice system, including those who come to the program before any system involvement, and then increase solutions available to both the responsible and harm parties that promote accountability and safety. They had a good example of measurable objectives, at least I thought. So I just am noting that. For staff training, their staff received 40 hours of domestic violence advocate training, 32 hours of tribal relations training, and ongoing staff development opportunities. Their average case per hour was given at 4.3 hours per session, and they provided some example cases. I think since they're sort of a newer implementation program, they gave specific examples of cases that took 170 to 210 hours. Their referral partners are Hood River and Wasco County District Attorney's offices, Wasco Youth Services, victim advocates, and police. And their intervention point was that at the point of harm, pre-charge, or pre-conviction. Their participant eligibility requirements are anyone who is referred by referral partners and meets the case criteria. So we did have some questions on that you'll see noted on the feedback slide. And I do want to note here that they had marked 3 additional priorities, but staff noted that they didn't provide sufficient detailed, or their response kind of left questions, so we didn't count three of them as actually meeting those preferences, even though they said yes. They are a current established program that has expended 79% of their current funds. Definition of successful completion is active engagement. Responsible party demonstrates impact of harm and increased empathy and reduction of harmful behaviors. They complete their agreement and participate in a graduation circle. They estimated at 47 referrals had been made to them. They served 47 people and 18 have completed the program. Again, there's some questions around the data there on our side, at least, that we'll be following up on. They noted challenges of having a higher demand than they had the capacity to serve, that there were socioeconomic barriers for some clients, some potential clients, and that limited funding also was a challenge for them. So in response to that, they hired additional staff, increased their program efficiencies, for doing ongoing partner training, and they're working on a community-based collaborative solutions to support some of those basic client needs to remove those barriers for participation, and they're also diversifying their revenue sources. So here is the suggested feedback. I'll give you a moment to read through that. And you can, here's your space for the discussion and any additional questions and comments as well.
I think one of my comments was from my notes is that it'd be interesting to have a little bit more information on the outcome if a person doesn't successfully complete the program.
Okay.
Simon here. I mean, I think those are good feedback questions, although I thought they were, maybe I missed. I know they've done a lot of engagement with NYU on the technical support. Maybe I don't know if that continues on the sort of program evaluation, or maybe not. I just, this is, I think again, one of the stronger applications, and that they've done an incredible community engagement process. So I guess I'll note, I think it's a very strong application. Stronger than the scoring you gave it.
I would echo Simon's comments. I think this is a really strong application. And they've done a tremendous amount of work over the last couple of years.
Thank you for those very positive comments. Anything to add or remove on these? I think for us, just the wording on that preference, being open to the intent of partnering, was a little ambiguous. So maybe that's why we were asking for follow-up. But your comment is noted, Simon. Anything else? And Tristan?
I guess just fleshing out a little bit of what Simon had said about that element. What I noticed from their application is that, and I don't know if this means it checks that box, but I recall it saying that they were hoping to partner with the Research Institute, pending like what funding is actually available to do so, but that they had received TA from NYU to collect data that would be very easily evaluated once they were able to solicit a research partner. So I found that to be really encouraging. I don't know if that means that checks that box. I also found it to be attentive to the realities of the current funding of this grant program, which is different than it has been in previous years.
We can remove that clarification needed question if you folks all kind of agree that they did respond to that question. We're perfectly happy to do that.
I thought that the question was answered, but I will leave it to other people if they disagree.
Okay. Elaine, it looks like your hand's up.
Yeah, I agree also. I think the question was answered. I also, in the slide before, when you were talking about the training, I felt like their training answer was really, really extensive.
The first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, they listed lots of different kinds of training that they have had, that they will have, that go way beyond this. It makes it look like this is an advocacy and tribal program, and that reference of staff training doesn't really reference the restorative justice components of their work that's in the training. So I would just note that training is extensive in their application.
Thank you.
I'm going to vote for that question being removed there. And I also thought this was a really, really strong application.
All right. You have been heard. We will take out that second bullet under clarification needed and note that preference has been met. And you'll see that change on the final application as well, or final application review as well. And Elena, it looks like your hand is up.
Yeah, and it may have been said before, but just to reiterate that I felt like this application, in a way that not everybody else was able to, really showed the base that's been built in the application itself. So some people actually know the work that they've done, but this application really outlined the way the program has been in development, and it was very concrete and descriptive, explicit. So.
Thank you for all those positive comments. And I think across the board, I mentioned this earlier, but we have had multiple conversations. I think the applications we received in general were really strong this time, and they have been only getting stronger over time. So CJC staff were very pleased when we read through the applications. So I'm happy to hear that you folks seem to have similar feelings. Okay, so if there's no more feedback for this specific application, we can go ahead and take a couple minute break, maybe until just a couple minutes before 10 a.m. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes if that's okay. All right, excellent. All right, hopefully everyone's trickling back in now. If when people come back online, they could turn on their cameras at least briefly so we can kind of see that everyone's back, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Halfway there. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Simon, and everyone else who turned on your cameras. So we're still waiting for a couple people. All right. So it looks like most everyone is back on again. So we're gonna go ahead and jump back in. Um, I do want to note here, I think we have about 9 applications to get through still, 2 hours left in our meeting, and we do have a little bit of discussion at the tail end about timeline and some budget considerations. So I'm going to try and move a little bit more quickly and maybe not say as much out loud. And if you folks don't mind just, reading through the slides as we're talking and so we can keep this moving forward and get through everyone, that would be much appreciated. So our next applicant is Conflict Artistry. So I have Elaine noted as a potential conflict here. The service area is statewide, and they have offices located in 3 counties and mobile and virtual services available as well. They're a community-based approach that provides individuals impacted by harm the opportunity to initiate an RJ process without involvement of the criminal justice system. And that's specifically focused on marginalized and underserved communities less likely to engage with the criminal justice system. For staff training, they stated they do 30 or more than 30 hours of RJ training and 35 plus hours of domestic violence and sex assault training, as well as ongoing specialized training. The average number of cases or hours per case is pretty a big range of 53 to 116 hours. And they stated they have more than 15 referral partners, including culturally specific organizations, educational institutions, mental health, social services, and community-based organizations. And the intervention point is pre-charge and pre-adjudication. And their eligibility requirements are for felony and misdemeanor cases especially involving domestic violence and sex assaults, and then interpersonal community-based harm that are covered under the Oregon revised statutes. So they are a current established program at about 62% expended currently. They had 41 clients as their referral number, 11 served, and 5 sets of participants. So I do want to note that for their challenges, they talked about the referral process and why is some that bit of discrepancy between the number referred and the number served. Um, Specifically that some partner agencies were sending referrals for clients that didn't qualify for services. So part of their response is to work on the education and refining their referral process eligibility criteria. Any questions or comments on the first slides, or can we move on to the recommended feedback? I see nodding. So just the sort of general applicant feedback themes that we noted. There was some and perhaps it was just staff's reading into it, since they did mention that folks had to have a harm that was in ORS to qualify for services, but some of the things that were listed, such as interpersonal harms and landlord-tenant disputes, would not result in criminal justice system intervention. So we just wanted to double check and clarify. Oh, sorry, my dog is barking. That those folks were, screened out appropriately. Any other comments or questions or feedback for this applicant?
Simon here. Again, I think, a strong development of, the kind of community referral and that number of referring partners is very impressive. And their focus with kind of racism and bias and sexual assault is some pretty strong work. And I guess kind of echo then what the feedback or the question is, is focusing on those sort of crime types or those types of cases versus ones that really don't fit the criteria. And then I guess, I don't know how it's the phrase on how, like we've said with a number of the applicants with the community referral pieces, is how to ensure that that's a strong referral pathway. Just the sort of time, energy, and money investment to be having that positive impact in the community. The ROI.
Thank you.
I would ditto those comments. That was one of my big points on my notes was just the coordination with the system partner, particularly since they indicated that they were going to be handling presumptive prison sentence cases, but we're missing that system partner piece.
Okay. And any other comments or questions for this applicant? Nope. All right.
Actually, I have one other
Oh,
comment.
okay.
One of the
Kathleen,
things that
sorry.
I noted was that it seemed like the staff was spending a tremendous amount of time sifting through cases that didn't necessarily meet program criteria. And it would be interesting for them to know like how they might be adjusting that because they are addressing that challenge.
Mhm.
Because I think that ends up using an enormous amount of staff time that could be devoted to, actual cases that are relevant for the program. I don't have a solution for them, but something for them to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Jimena here. I do want to note that it's an impressive list of community partners and what a lift it has gone into creating such a wide net of community partnerships. That's impressive.
Thank you for that comment, Jimena. And I
Also on a-
believe, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Also on a note, one of my other comments was they have a really nice, strong elements in their proposal about working with the harm parties.
So besides the suggested applicant feedback on the slide, there was extra emphasis on that, making sure the case types meet the definition of RJ, it sounds like. Some clarification around explaining if referral partners will refer violent felonies and those with criminal history. Oh, yeah, those are ongoing, some ongoing questions that we're applying to across the board. And then how are you addressing the challenge of spending staff time sifting through cases to determine eligibility, so that on that referral pathway and educating the partners some more information. And I'm sorry, that did not come out very clearly, but we noted those concerns. Let me know if there's anything else that we missed. Doesn't look like it. Okay. So we're on to Clackamas County Resolution Services. So for this one, we weren't sure if there was a conflict or not, because it does mention a partnership with Latino Network, and a sort of sister proposal that they were anticipating Latino Network submit, but that didn't occur. So I just wanted to, check in and see if there was a conflict on this one or not.
Yeah, I will not submit any comments, or I will just leave it like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So their service area is Clackamas County. The program description is that Clackamas County Resolution Services is a unit of the Children, Families, and Community Connections Division of Clackamas County, and their goals are to strengthen and expand the relationship with the juvenile department, prevent youth up to age 18 from justice system involvement by establishing RJ programming in schools and CBOs, mobilizing the county's Youth Action Board to advise scaling up of the program and co-facilitating RJ dialogues, coordinating RJ efforts across Clackamas County, establishing partnerships to offer RJ services to adults. So they have a whole lot of different goals and directions that they're going with this application. For staff training, they have 35 to 40 hours of restorative dialogue training for their facilitators, and then they talk about targeted RJ trainings for schools and other partner organizations. The average number of hours per case is listed at 12 to 30. Their referral partners are schools, community-based organizations, youth-serving organizations, police departments, and then the Clackamas County Juvenile Department. And the intervention point is really before criminal justice system involvement or juvenile justice system involvement. So that's pre-adjudication, although they do mention post-adjudication. And then eligibility requirements are pre-adjudication youth who caused harm, or post-adjudication youth up to age 18 who have committed misdemeanors and felonies. So,
Couple of questions, but I was just going to wait until
okay. So their current implementation program, they have expended about 38% of those preliminary planning funds so far. The definition of successful completion is diversion from further justice system involvement or no charges filed for those pre-adjudication clients, and then successful completion and charges dismissed as a result of participation for those post-adjudication clients. And then they had an estimated number that they will serve of 40 to 60 cases and 80 to 130 clients. And some, anticipated challenges and responses are listed there. So I'll give you a minute to read that. I do want to note that, um, the school partnership and the RJ in school was a large component of their application, and one of their definitions of success was to include all 19 middle school and 14 high schools in having sustaining RJ programs, and all staff are fully trained, and discipline policies are more restorative than punitive. So that was also provided as part of their definition of success for this grant. And here is the suggested feedback. We have, particularly with the school-based prevention services, what they describe as school-wide prevention services, how those folks will be screened and how that component will meet with the definition of restorative justice. And then we did have a question about clarifying what their collaboration with Latino Network would look like, since that other application did not end up being submitted. And they didn't provide the number of referrals they anticipated receiving, so we would hope to get that number from them as well. So we are open for discussion on Clackamas County Resolution Services.
I'm happy to jump in. I guess I was a bit confused that it seems like a very heavy focus on schools, which I didn't think is the intent of the Restorative Justice Grant Program. And then Clackamas County already has a very robust youth diversion program through the juvenile department. And so any clarification that can be provided, like some of the other proposals, is how would this be increasing those case numbers or the diversion? I was definitely, I guess, more clarification around misdemeanors and then post-adjudication felonies. If that's post-adjudication doesn't seem to fit the criteria. And you've asked it already. I wasn't sure if Latino Network was submitting something in addition to this, or if that wasn't, because I didn't see it in the grant folder. But this seemed to be a very heavy school focus, which I wasn't sure if fits our criteria.
Thank you for that. And Elaine, it looks like you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, in addition to the school focus, but also just the measures of success feel like they fall outside of the grant sort of focus, and also just seem really big for something that they may not have control over. So being able to change norms at 19 different schools, for example, and have it's how is that measured? Who's measuring it? What are the steps to get there? It just feels way beyond the intention of the funding, and there's a way that this is building on what they've already done. So I don't want to be reading in. I want to find it in the application. So there was, that specifically, the measures of success need to match the intention of the funding. And so just more clarification around numbers, around how those measures are going to, how those things are going to be measured, and whether or not they fall within the parameters and the scope of the intention.
Thank you. And Kathleen?
I did a lot with what was said. I guess my challenge too a little bit is that it was looking at the schools at the same time we allow potentially for harm in the community, and I think an argument can be potentially made for young people, kind of that school prison pipeline. And so I think that's a difficult discussion for this team overall to have, where we say you're engaged. I think the application specifically says engaged in the, we have in quotations, front end of the criminal and or juvenile legal system. And so where does that community piece versus school piece, where do we want to draw that line? I don't know. I think that's a challenge.
You and Tristan, looks like you also have a comment or question.
I have a comment and a couple questions. So Kathleen, I agree that that's a important conversation to engage in, especially since we've had a couple programs, this one in the Lutheran program, that have talked about schools. where I see, when I think about like that chart that Rima showed, where it's like harm in the community and then there's an arrow to arrest and all that stuff, I think for me, the important thing is that there is a harm in the community that constitutes a criminal harm that could go into the criminal system. And I think the question and the issue maybe with this application is that it's happening before there is a harm in the community. It's seeking to do kind of pure prevention work. And so does from my view of kind of how this grant program has been laid out, preventing a harm from happening is not an intervention in a case that would otherwise potentially be prosecuted. It's like a little bit too far removed. So, but I could see, and I see what you're saying, that there's a harm in the community at a school that could be charged criminally and or in juvenile court, and there's a decision made to refer to restorative justice as opposed to an arrest being made or referral to the juvenile system. So that's kind of where I see that line. And when I read this application to me seemed to be really before harm has occurred, kind of pure school-based RJ work of changing culture, changing disciplinary practices. I think it mentioned addressing suspensions. I didn't read anything about it mentioning addressing cases that could be referred into the criminal system. That's my comment. In terms of questions, I had a few questions. I wanted a little bit more clarification around their kind of the relationship with the juvenile department. My read of this is that the current juvenile program is post-adjudication. And then I saw on the previous slide that post-adjudication might lead to dismissal, so I wasn't clear about that. My understanding of when I think of post-adjudication, I think of there's been a finding made or a conviction has been made, and then RJ is available kind of as a condition of probation, but not as a dismissal avenue. And so I guess what I want to know is there a program that that is established now that leads to dismissal? And if there isn't, then is this proposal purporting to create such a program? And I will say, I'm pretty sure that the only options that were given were implementation and established program. This proposal to me read like a planning grant, like a continuation of a planning grant, which I recognize was not an option that was given, but maybe that's also a piece of clarification, like how much of this is actually going to be continued planning, how much of this would be implementation. And where is that piece where there's really that eligibility factor of a case, being dismissed or intervention point that is preventing it from going into the criminal system after a harm has occurred? I think we said this for all of the programs, but on page 15, they say that 11 clients have been referred to by the juvenile department. I wasn't sure if that was projected cases, if that was post-adjudication cases that are not being dismissed, or pre-adjudication cases that are eligible for dismissal through going through their program. Yeah, the schools thing. This program to me presented a lot of questions when it came to the preferences. They mentioned that they accept felonies, that they accept person offenses, that they accept cases with presumptive prison, that they don't have criminal history exclusion. But that didn't actually seem to, it didn't seem to be the case when it came to the partnership with their system referral partner, which is the juvenile department. It wasn't even clear to me if they currently have a relationship with the juvenile department where cases can get dismissed through going through their programming. And so some of the preferences portions that they checked to me kind of seemed more theoretical than what is actually happening right now. And I guess I would just want more concrete information about how they expect to get to that point.
Thank you for that. So I'm just to try and capture kind of the heart of that last um, series of questions is really around how much this proposal is for planning versus implementation and what their current relationship is. Do they currently have a relationship with the juvenile department, or is this something that is under development, so it doesn't exist yet?
And I guess specifically for the or like the work that could lead to a dismissal, I think I thought it was clear from the application that they do have a relationship with the juvenile department for post-adjudication cases. And I couldn't tell if they actually have a relationship now or actively working on a relationship for cases that could lead to dismissal that would qualify for the grant, or if all of this work is being done, post-adjudication without the possibility of dismissal.
Okay, thank you. And Elaine, it looks like your hand's up as well.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at page 14. And under eligibility, they say right at the very top, if funded, the program will seek to serve pre-adjudicated youths who have caused harm referred by schools, law enforcement, and CBOs. And so there is a caused harm assumption in that eligibility. But then in the next section, they're talking about screening, and they use a two-stage screening process. In the first stage, it is expected that all referrals from schools or CBOs will involve harm that does not arise to the level of a crime. So therefore, they could involve any situation of person or non-person harm. And so I just it is throwing little descriptors in there that I'm having trouble following. So it's pretty directly states working with cases that would not rise to the level of a crime, but also post harm. So I just don't know what that little space is. Is it caused harm versus prevention? That clarifies a little bit, but also what level. And then it does go on to say, which is this will each partner will need to determine the specific instances of harm they wish to address through RJ. And what it sounds like is what Tristan was suggesting too, and that is, it sounds like they're trying to push RJ practices back into schools and other settings so that partners stop referring and actually take on some of these non-crime related cases. But that's not as clear as I want it to be. Because then it says this will vary over time and may initially be limited by funding. So I don't know if that means funding requirements within this funding or funding in general in the world. But again, it's that space of clarity. It does it, and I noticed that you sort of scored it in the it passes muster category, but some of these questions to me make me wonder if it did. The proposal, not the program. So that's what I just want more clarity to make sure that it's meeting the standards of the funding.
Yep, and I think anytime that, for us internally at least, we go back and forth on trying to search through an application because we're debating about whether or not they answered a question, is a place where we need more information. So it sounds like you're on the same page with that. So here's the feedback we have written down so far for the Clackamas County Resolution Services. Provide more information on how this RJ program would increase diversion efforts for youth as it is already occurring through the youth department. Explain how your goals are being measured and how you will reach your goals. Align the measures of success, and that's specifically the school prevention piece, to the scope of the RJ grant. The current juvenile program is post-adjudication, so please provide clarity on if the program leads to dismissal pre-adjudication. Does the program exist already, or is this proposal to establish that pathway? And then just to clarify whether it's planning grant or implementation. And then do you have a relationship with the juvenile department for pre-adjudication cases? And will referral partners refer violent felonies and those with criminal history? And if not, how do you expect to get to that point? So that's just a standard feedback that we're applying for most of these applications at this point. So that's how we captured the notes. Obviously, we'll go back and review the footage from this meeting as well. But was there anything that we definitely missed that needs to be on that list? All right, I just said a whole bunch of words out loud, so I don't know if it was even.
And they're all recorded.
Yeah, they're all recorded.
You're doing good.
Um, okay, so anything else that we want to include in our feedback for this applicant? I'm not seeing any hands or anything, so we'll go ahead and move on. So Stand-in Restorative Justice is our next applicant. Their service area is Crook, Jefferson, and rural Deschutes. Their Silver Circles program is developed to fill a gap in services for adults age 60 and older who have experienced financial exploitation, theft, family disputes, or other harms. And their goal is to pilot and implement an RJ program that is a community-based alternative to the criminal legal system for those types of cases. Staff training includes customized training on restorative justice dialogue process, ongoing training opportunities, and then partnering with Restorative Justice on the Rise for technical assistance. They gave a tiered model for their average number of hours per case with like an overall average of 29 hours. They're still working out exactly who their referral partners will be, but the intervention point is intended to be before law enforcement involvement or at the point of involvement. And their participant eligibility requirements are adults 60 years older that are impacted by those misdemeanor and felony harms. And they also mentioned capacity disputes. We did note that there were 2 priorities that they marked yes to, but we didn't feel they provided sufficient detail on. That'll be noted on that 3rd feedback slide. They are a current planning grantee that has expended 41% of their funds so far. Their definition of successful completion is, responsible party participation, completion of repair agreement, and then connection to resources and reintegration circle for willing participants. And they estimate that they would get 25 people referred and 23 served during the biennium. And then they noted some potential challenges, especially around the geographic and demographic context of building that community trust in a rural area. And I'll just pause here so you folks can read the rest of that slide. Right, and then here is our suggested applicant feedback. And I have to warn you, the type gets smaller and smaller as we go. So I apologize in advance. Eventually we get to more slides, but if you're having trouble viewing any of the bullet points, please let me know and I can go back to reading them all out loud as well. All right, Kathleen, it looks like you have a hand up.
I think the feedback that you provided matches a lot of the questions that I had. The only other thing that popped up for me was that they had checked off that they were not a nonprofit, but indicated that they would be using volunteers, and that may be something that they want to look into. At least my understanding is that if you're not a nonprofit or a public entity that, or like a county or something, that you can't actually use volunteers.
That is a great note. Any other discussion or comments for this applicant?
I think you captured the kind of questions and feedback that's needed. It's a unique approach. It's targeting a pretty vulnerable population. Engaging in rural communities is more challenging, or is challenging, and distances makes that so. I can sort of understand lower case numbers, etc., and the additional supports needed. And then I think these are great clarifying questions to better understand that process.
Thank you. Okay, Elaine?
Yeah, I do think that there's an enormous amount of potentially prosecutable crimes against elderly people. And so I do think that the population is really an important one. I'd love to see something like this go forward. I think that's part of the issue, is that so much of this goes unreported and it's committed by family members. And so I do think that they spoke to that. I do think that the presumptive crime and the understanding of the criminal justice system goes hand in hand with the fact that lots of these cases never ever come to the attention of law enforcement or other authorities. And so I think that's actually a unique opportunity for this program to address that and to highlight that, and then a lot of this would kind of fall into place for me. And would build. I do appreciate also that they completed a community needs assessment and that they have some avenues for education and referral development that they're already connected to, that were also unique to working with this group of people. So really appreciated that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for stand-in restorative justice? All right, I'm not seeing any. So we'll go ahead and move to the next applicant. So the next applicant is Transformative Justice Community Regroup. Their service area is a Willamette Valley with possible expansion to less resourced areas. So I think we do have a question about where exactly that refers to. Their program description is to provide healing to returning citizens or persons who have experienced incarceration and those who have been victims of crime by using a transformational model. And they talk about employing credible messengers to connect with returning citizens, delivering healing services through a variety of RJ practices, and establishing partnerships with at least 10 community organizations. As part of their objectives, their staff training includes 40 hours of restorative justice training, 40 hours of domestic violence training, and then an 80-hour pure wellness training and an 80-hour credible messenger training. The average hours per case is a sliding scale based on the severity of case, with a large range from 10 to 100 hours. And they provided a list of about 10 CBO partners for potential referral sources, and also noted that the law enforcement partners, that avenue needs to be developed. The intervention point would be pre-conviction, and participant eligibility requirements are adults with felonies, excluding cases where the responsible party is experiencing psychosis, misrepresenting harm, being abusive to staff. And they noted that they would expand to be able to serve youth if those types of cases came up. So they marked yes for one preference, but didn't provide sufficient details. So that'll be noted on that last slide. They are a current planning grantee, so this would be an implementation program. They're at about 41% expended for their current funds. Their definition of successful completion is the responsible party meeting the objectives of the program and feels the program has brought them healing and they're ready to move on. And they had a range of the number of participants they believe they will serve to be from 48 to 72. Pause here so you can look at the challenges and response. And then there's our suggested applicant.
Can you just go
feedback.
back? Can
Oh,
you go
yes.
back to, sorry, I just,
No problem.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me to take a little more time. I'm in go mode now. It's like pushing through. All right. So there's the suggested feedback. So we had a specific question related to utilizing, pre-charge agreement not to file charges or post-plea dismissals as part of their eligibility criteria. And then that clarification about the service area, referral number. So is there anything beyond what is listed here that you all would like to discuss?
I think you captured it. It just feels it feels very vague and very broad, both in scope and also geographically. The Willamette Valley is huge. So I think a lot more detail is needed on multiple levels.
Okay.
I think one of my concerns is that there's a lot of discussion about potential partnerships and expanding the knowledge of what restorative justice is, and that for me to get to a point to really be able to support the program, I would want to see an agreement with a partner. Otherwise, my concern is they could spend the next 2 years still trying to develop that relationship. So some sort of agreement that somebody's willing to be working with them to move forward with the application.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments?
Yes, I'm just looking for the definition of success, because they do state that they're talking about pre-adjudicated people that have caused harm, even though their main focus is folks that have been incarcerated previously, both, and they do make a point somewhere that the line between the person being impacted by harm and the person causing harm gets blurry in the work that they do with people. Absolutely, 100%. I think the place where this application is the strongest is really looking at the services and supports to harmed parties. So I think they do a really good job there. But the definition of success, meeting the objectives of the program, that feels, again, vague as the word I would use. And so I was going back through the application to see if I could find ready to move on as measured by what, complete has brought them healing as measured how, so I wanted more kind of clarification of, I have a sense and that they're doing boatloads of work that are really important, and that this funding has always had this sort of shape around it that sometimes leaves some of the good work out, and we still need to make sure that it's inside. And so I think we need good referral numbers for the specific kinds of cases that this funding can support, and definitions of success that also align with it.
And are hopefully measurable is what it sounds like.
And are measurable. Yeah.
Okay.
And they are measurable, but I want to hear how they're measuring them. Yeah.
Got it. And just to go back to Kathleen's concern to make sure we captured it, the comment back to them would be, please include an agreement with a partner to show that they will provide referrals to the program. So you're really asking for them to demonstrate that they have a partnership by providing that supporting documentation, correct?
Yes, because I think that was a question that kept coming up in this, that they don't feel that they have that yet. I've read some other applications where they're still working on it, but they're in communication and things seem to be further along. So, and I think one of the other comments I have here is it would be helpful to have a little more information on what their actual restorative process would look like when they actually have a case. It would be helpful.
Okay. That has also been noted. So anything else for this applicant? No, doesn't look like anyone's raising their hand or anything. So next is neighbor to neighbor. So I don't have any conflicts noted for this one. This program area will be in Benton with option to expand to Marion, Lynn, and Yamhill counties. The program is a restorative justice diversion program for the Benton Circuit Court in partnership with Benton County DA. And it will provide connections to key services using the RJ conferencing model with a long-term goal of increasing community confidence and safety responses, providing harm parties with opportunities for empowerment and healing, and then restoring responsible parties to belonging and stability in the community. They also note to reduce public expense in responding to criminal harm as well. Their staff training is 40 hours of basic mediation training and at least one 24-hour RJ facilitation training. Average case per or hours per case is estimated at 15 to 30. The referral partners are, again, Benton County District Attorney and Circuit Court. And the intervention point would be pre-adjudication or at plea agreement. And eligible participants would be adults with misdemeanors and felonies, excluding cases with resisting arrest, evading arrest, or similar charges. And they had said yes to 6 out of 7 of those RJ preferences. So they are a planning grantee that has expended about 33% of their rather small award. Their definition of successful completion is the responsible party actively participates and completes their restorative agreements within the diversion period. They didn't provide estimated numbers for those 3 data points, so we're definitely going to be following up on that. So that is neighbor to neighbor. I'll give you a moment to read the rest of the slide. Right. We'll go ahead and move on to the feedback. Is there anything that you would like to discuss for this applicant? Any additional questions or concerns to convey to them? We're gonna just pause for another moment just in case anyone needs a second to look through their notes.
Yeah, I'm looking through my notes. Thank you. I had a question about what the ongoing support or contact with both the responsible party and the harmed party looked like. I couldn't tell that there was anything kind of happening in between some of these processes.
Excellent.
And then just you know, I mean, I like where it's situated, and I like the focus of it, and the goals were good, but there was some vagueness also in how they were going to. I mean, I liked the response to the problem, the challenges that they were going to do more in person and ongoing meetings and relationship development, but those relationships feel really critical to this being possible, not just successful, but possible. with the DA in particular having most of the discretion about whether the cases go to this process or not. It felt like it was very dependent on the district attorney's office.
So similar to the last application, just some more information and perhaps supporting documentation to show that partnership or where.
Yeah.
Okay. And I see Kathleen nodding as well. Thank you for being on screen. Anything else for this particular applicant? Oh, I'm not seeing anything. Just give it another second. So the comments we have written down in addition to what we have on the slide is what does engagement between the harm party and responsible party look like? And then again, that note about please include an agreement or at least additional information on the partner and how the referral process will work. Okay. Looks like we're done with that one. We've been through a lot of information, so I feel like we're running out of steam, but we've only got a few more left, so bear with me. So,
Can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you.
Sorry. Okay, I managed to log on to Teams with my laptop, but I can't get my camera to work. So
Okay.
I am here. Sorry not to be on camera.
No worries. Thank you for your working through your continued issues with Teams and joining us. Right. So our next applicant is Resolve Center for Dispute Resolution. Their service area is Jackson and Josephine counties with consultation services in Klamath, Portland, and Northern California. They work with justice-involved individuals, crime survivors, and justice professionals and community stakeholders to build pathways for accountability, healing, and transformation. And their objective is to expand the young adult diversion program and develop and sustain community-based restorative justice. They mentioned they have ongoing training such as de-escalation, youth mental health, first aid, threat assessment, and other RJ-related topics. They average 15 to 20 hours per case, and their referral partners are community-based organizations, schools, businesses, and individuals. So they do a community referral pathway and then also Jackson County District Attorney. The intervention point is pre-law enforcement involvement for community referrals and pre-charge for youth. And the eligibility requirements are all referrals excluding domestic violence and sex assault for community referrals, and then cases involving misdemeanor and person crimes, excluding felonies and DUIs for youth. So we're getting into the folks that have more comments, as you'll see on the last slide. So there's more, instances of missing information maybe. So they are a current grantee with 76% of their funds expended, and they're an established program. Their definition of success was determined on a case-by-case basis, includes engaging in process, taking accountability, participation, completion of restitution and fulfillment of accountability agreements. And they gave us an estimate of 10 people either served or that they think they will serve, which is very different from what we have. We actually have a higher counts. Again, that's a data question that we are continuing to look into. So we'll pause here and then move on momentarily to the feedback slide. They are another program that noted, they're having some difficulty with engagement barriers, and one of their responses was building some support for clients, transportation, food, other things. So that was another thing that was noted on several applications that I just wanted to call out. Okay. So can people read these tiny bullet points? Okay. I think overall, the applicants that we're going through now at the end of this presentation, there was less information included in the application, so there are just a lot more questions overall. So that's reflected in, these increased number of bullet points. But of course, please, let us know if there are additional questions and concerns. So it looks like Simon has his hand up.
Yeah, like some of the others, the sort of the question if this had been and is still building on an existing service relationship with the district attorney's office and the juvenile department, like what is the additional capacity and cases that this funding is allowing? And it seemed to say that increasing the capacity will allow them to serve more. So I guess I had a question on, were they already turning away youth or cases, or not getting referrals due to the lack of capacity? So what would this increase? And maybe that relates to a projection on numbers, because how I read it, they were, again, quite small numbers.
Mhm. Thank you. And Tristan, looks like your hand is also up.
Hi, yeah. So my read of this application was that it was not applying for a juvenile restorative justice program. I understood this application to be applying for two different things. One, a pre-charged transitional age youth program that is, technically adults 18 to 24, and what they called a community-based restorative justice program. I think my question relates to the first bullet point, which is kind of, how does a community-based restorative justice program meet grant eligibility? Based on the description in the application, it seemed like these referrals would be kind of more consistent with school-based RJ or with organizational RJ. And I couldn't really tell what the nexus was with the criminal system. There was a point on page 9 where they said these referrals typically involve situations not connected to the criminal or juvenile legal systems and are often made proactively to prevent escalation, avoid formal system involvement, and support early intervention through restorative practices. So that, to me, I couldn't tell if that was before a harm occurs, we are intervening to reduce instances of violence from happening or instances of harm from happening, or if that is saying a harm has occurred and we're not going to send it into the criminal system, we're going to intervene with restorative justice. Kind of similar to some of the conversations we've been having about school-based RJ and how that could potentially qualify and how it could not. So that was the clarity that I was seeking from this application.
Okay. And it looks like Elaine, your hand is up as well.
Yes, and it's part of I think what happened to me is that there are different places in the application where people answer some of these questions differently. And so I agree with Tristan that they're really talking about expand. It says on page 4, expand the young adult diversion program, pre-charge diversion program developed in partnership with Jackson County District Attorney's Office, what it already is doing, and then it says funding would allow us to add staffing capacity to serve a higher volume of participants and to further deepen stakeholder engagement in this age group. So that feels like the Jackson County specific. And then also sort of really influencing the acceptance of community-based restorative justice in this sort of partnership development. And it also says funding would allow us to establish a dedicated position to coordinate and facilitate 5 to 8 in year 1 and 7 to 10 in year 2, no cost community restorative justice cases annually. Provide greater financial and staffing flexibility, etc. So it feels like it's both focused on that sustainability of the programming and then building on programming that already exists. But it does seem pretty clearly to be focusing on the sort of youth and transition young adults.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for this one? All right, so for resolve, really we want to ask if they can provide clarity on, what this, if this is an existing service relationship and if they're building additional capacity for more cases, which it sounds like, and if they were maybe even turning away referrals based on lack of capacity in the past, then how does the proposed community-based restorative justice program meet that definition of RJ? So explain more specifically about the nexus between the program and the criminal legal system. It's kind of the crux of what I think those comments were about. Let me know if I'm missing anything. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Thank you. All right. So on that note, we'll move on to Red Lodge Transition Services, one of our new folks. So their service area is Clackamas, Multnomah, Washington, and Marion counties. And they note they could expand to other counties through relationships with other tribes. The program description is, well, actually the mission statement is to provide incarceration, prevent incarceration and reduce recidivism, primarily among Native American women and men by providing assistance for individuals released from incarceration and treatment centers. They seek an upstream opportunity to find healing solutions for people who have been harmed and foster accountability for those who created harm. The staff training, they noted that they had an intent to collaborate with RJ didn't outline any other additional staff. They estimated an average of 10 to 20 hours per case. They talked a bit about their current collaborations, including social service agencies, CBOs, drug court, probation and parole. But it seemed like that referral partnership piece was still under development. There was a lack of clarity on the intervention point, and they did state that their participant eligibility requirements were misdemeanor and non-person crimes. So this one was an application where it seemed like there was quite a bit of information still needed to even really see if it would be eligible or not. So, we noted that both the purposes and requirements are not met with the information so far, and also just the RFGP criteria. The definition of successful completion is all parties feel seen and understood, they have a mutually agreeable solution, and it's resolved without the use of the criminal justice system. This is a brand new applicant, and it would be an implementation program. Again, there's a bit of information that wasn't provided, and partly that is due to our confusion on those questions about the number of referred, et cetera, and the challenges. And So this is one where there's multiple slides. So I'll pause. We've got, I think, 3 slides to read through because we just, there was a lot of questions. So I'll give you a minute. If we can get some nods or thumbs up or something when folks are done reading this slide, we can move to the next one. All right, we got a couple, so we'll go to the next one. So on the second and third slide, it was really more clarification and not the eligibility stuff. Just oh, it was only 2 slides. I apologize. So I see, Elaine, you have your hand up if you want to jump in and get us started.
Yeah, I just have to acknowledge this sort of dissonance that I'm experiencing, given that sort of the origin story of restorative justice is Indigenous practice that is so embedded and so sort of ingrained and integrated into the practices of communal living and communities. And so it's a little bit like taking it away from home and then making people at home explain how this fits the picture we want in a way we want it to fit. And so I'm just having that dissonance and that awareness that there is something that feels like taken for granted or a given in the way this application was written and the expectations around it, which makes it not fit our boxes very well at all, but I'm not sure the work itself wouldn't. And so I'm just having that dissonance. And I'm not saying just because they are an Indigenous or a Native focused entity, but because of the way they responded to the questions and the way that it feels. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge and name that for myself.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. And also, I think, applications or applicants that seem to have a more difficult time giving us what we wanted to get with our questions at CJC were all newer folks for the most part that we haven't funded yet. So I think there's something there too. And I do want to state that we're, as an agency working on some more resource materials for applicants in general on how to, what kind of information we're looking for and how to answer those questions.